Hitler apologist. And at the very least, Tucker Carlson is someone willing to give a seat to someone who is apologizing for the crimes and the atrocities that were committed by the Nazi regime. We will be talking about most recent interview from Tucker Carlson of Daryl Cooper, representing Tucker Carlson's confused face is Kirk Wilcox, who is joining me today, and also we have Jonathan today. So before we go to the video, I wanna ask you guys if you watched it, if you've seen any clips, and we will also go through the clips. We'll have you, but I want to ask you if you guys have any observation first. Let me start with Kirk.
Well, the show is like 2.5 hours long, the Tucker show, and I didn't get the message until about 2.5 hours, and I was like, why are they not giving me enough time to watch this? It's clearly because I imagine you, Daniel, you have ulterior motives that you're not telling us, and you don't really want me to watch it. You want me to show up here unprepared, and I got to ask why.
Yeah, I didn't want you to see the whole thing. I wanted to hide the truth. Uh, but I mean, just to quickly say a few things about it. I mean, the way Tucker Carlson like started the video, like okay, Kirk. He started the Tucker Carlson started the interview. Basically, it was just him, and he said, something like social media is like trying to silence us. While that video was on every single like social media there is, and on like YouTube alone, it had like 500,000 views within like 2 days. So again, this
And
like
don't forget, Elon Musk, one of the most influential people in the world right now, and the operator of one of the biggest social media websites, reposted it and said, "This is a must watch."
Yeah, which again proves that Elon is a big dork. But Jonathan, some first thoughts before we go to the clips?
Well, I didn't watch it because I wanted to see the live Kirk faces. So that's what we're here for. So great. Keep it up, Kirk. I'm loving it.
All right, so maybe we can go straight into the clips. Just few maybe disclaimers. We won't focus too much on the historical aspects because the person who is interviewing Dr. Cooper at least calls himself a historian. There's many inaccuracies in what he says. It would be too long to go through everything, and there's been people doing that. So if we catch something, we might comment on it, but we won't focus too much on specifically the historical aspects. I will try to focus more on the, I think, very revealing philosophy. But yeah, Kirk.
Oh, I guess I got corrected in the chat. Thank you. I guess Elon Musk said it was worth watching, not must watch. Thank you for the correction. And also keep in mind, Tucker, you mentioned that this guy is a historian. Tucker starts the show by saying he's one of the most important historians in the world right now. So this is someone Tucker is really excited to talk to and apparently respects and admires.
Yeah, and with that, I think we can go straight into the clips. So we'll start we'll start in like a middle. I have few clips. I think the most controversial parts is when he talked about the Second World War and Churchill, but I have also a few clips towards the end where he talked about Putin, Orban, and Trump. So just saying
all his mates.
Yeah, because they also spent like 20 minutes talking about Jim Jones, and I went through the whole thing, and I just didn't understand why are they even like talking about it, because it was super weird. I think the guy just really likes to hear himself talk. But let's go to the clips now.
Around it, it's every event that's central to a nation's understanding of itself, and then that changes over time. So, do you think that we are far enough away, 80 years from that war, where you can try to take as an objective a look as you can, and that will be allowed?
No, I don't. I think we've got a little ways to go on that, but I hope I can kind of start to break the ice a little bit, because like here's the problem with doing something like that. And this is something I'm very aware of as I research it and start to work on the project, is that when you have a mythologized historical event, that is told, that is, I mean, again, you go to a lot of places in Europe, it's a legal requirement. Over here, it's not quite that, but it almost might as well be, where that this event is going to be described from a certain perspective. You're going to approach it a certain way. There are just certain things you're not allowed to question. You have to,
Like, literally, it's a crime to ask questions.
Right.
Yes.
Then whenever that's the case, when you try to add any type of balance to that account, when you try to tell the story in a way that brings other approaches and other perspectives into it, it's going to look like you're trying to justify those other things. That's just how it's going to seem to people who are very locked into this side. And so if you...
So yeah, this first part that I want to talk about, these people are, and I'm saying these people, but there are, certain kind of people that very much like to say, Candace also does that, like, oh, we cannot even talk about this. Like, you cannot even talk about that, ignoring, they always say it on like a video that has like 1 million views at least, and is very popular, and they definitely, nothing happens to them. So he mentions that basically, there is like a narrative when it comes to Second World War, and you basically cannot challenge it. And so when it comes to specifically Europe, there are basically laws, and when I say laws, I usually I'm talking about my country, Slovakia, and some of the major ones. For example, Germany also has this. They have laws against the Holocaust denial, and I think also when it comes to showing swastikas, I think that's specific to Germany, that you can only use it in educational content. But again, whenever I hear someone saying, oh, you cannot even talk about Second World War, it always somehow manifests itself in some sort of Holocaust denialism. Like, you can ask questions, you can like go into the history and look into things, and ask questions. How do we know how many people died? Where do we get the data from? You can, what were the motivations on every side? You can even look at Germany from like, sort of not necessarily like an objective stance, but neutral stance. You're just looking at who were the people, what do they believe in. You can do that, but whenever someone says they can't, they always try to deny the atrocities that have happened in some way, and we will go into that. But again, yeah, I'm wondering what you guys think, because I would really like to see someone who says, we cannot even ask questions, and they actually have like genuine questions instead of like trying to deny what has happened. But let me start with Kirk.
Well, I mean, he does bring up a legitimate point that I think in Germany, I think in other parts of Europe, like it is unfortunately a crime. I don't think it should be. And it's horrible that there are laws on restricting speech in places like Germany. But, but then he says like, oh, well, go on.
Yeah, just to bring up a specific example, for example, of from Slovakia. So there were people who basically, I think they are like lawfully, they are like Holocaust deniers, but those people were like hardcore Holocaust deniers. Like, you have to go pretty hard to like get into court. No one's gonna like arrest you if you just ask, well, where do we get the 6 million Jews number from? No, the police is not gonna like come in and arrest me just by like asking that question. So I think the way,
like, if you're in Germany and you ask a chat GPT, like, how many people died in the Holocaust, was it really 6 million? You're not going to immediately get a knock on your door by the Stasi or whatever.
Anything else, or should we go to Jonathan?
So one thing that jumped out to me was he says that we need to be objective, but also we need a balance. And I'm not sure those are necessarily the same thing. I don't think you come at objective truth by just trying to find an equal balance between different perspectives, because someone's perspective might be biased, it might be exaggerated, they might be lying, and you wouldn't say, well, it's somewhere in the middle. It's like, no, there's truth there. We should try to find the truth, and you don't come to truth by just balancing every and any perspective on a conflict like World War II.
Jonathan, what do you think? You really wanted to get the live reaction, so what is your live reaction so far?
Well, first of all, this guy, he doesn't look, he looks like a nerd. He doesn't look very dangerous guy, but usually these types of intellectuals are the most dangerous. Yuval Noah Harari is a good example for that. But yeah, one of the things that I think, like, yeah, I agree with Kirk. Shouldn't be illegal, of course, to say these things, but it's a good sign of civilization if you say these things and you're immediately shunned by everybody. I think it's a good sign, and we should be still kind of happy that it's still there. Well, I'm seeing us more moving towards a direction with people who like Elon Musk shares this, so we're probably moving towards a direction will be less reprehensible to say these views. But so far as it is, it's a good sign, and we should be happy that people like this guy, whatever he's gonna say, I don't know what he's gonna say, but I guess it's kind of bad. It's good that he's viewed as a reprehensible man. His ideas are wrong, and we shouldn't give a platform to them. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and many people.
I'd also like.
Go on,
I'd
Kirk.
also like to, something I meant to mention earlier. He talks about like, oh, it's also like this United States. Like he kind of like conflates the United States with the laws on the restrictions on speech in places like Germany, like as if to suggest that getting ostracized for having a horrible opinion and legal consequences are the same thing when they're not. And also in the United States, I mean, there's a long history of people scrutinizing war efforts, especially Vietnam and especially the Second Iraq War. So I don't think it's nearly the same thing. But then I also want to elaborate on my balancing point. At some point in this video, I don't know if you're going to play the clip, but he talks about like, oh, no one really thinks about this from the perspective of like everyday Germans in Weimar Germany who thought, a lot of them probably felt like they were being victimized and wronged after World War I.
That's the next clip.
Okay.
Maybe we can play and we can comment on it immediately.
Right, so you can watch this process of a descent into madness as it's happening, and to get to a point where you can bring yourself to step into the shoes of any other human being and understand that as much as as much as it makes you uncomfortable, it is just a human being, and at the very, very like base level, their motivations are the same as yours, their needs are the same as yours, but that we're a multivariate species that can go a lot.
Yeah, so he is talking specifically about the Germans during the Second World War, stepping into the shoes of those. But yeah, Kirk, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, I think he mentions, I don't think it was in the clip, but he's like, yeah, they genuinely felt victimized. And this is a question and a topic that's explored by a lot of historians and people who are just curious. And I think one of the reasons why people are so curious about World War II is because like, how could a country like Germany like turn to Hitler and the Nazis and throw them the car keys? Like that's a really good question. I know Leonard Peacock has wrote an extensive book on this called The Ominous Parallels. I'd recommend everyone check that out if you have not already. But then going back to my point about balancing and like, oh, no one thinks about this from the perspective of like the Germans. It's like, would we apply this same level of charitability to say like the Salem witch trials or the other witch trials and persecutions and executions? Like, well, did we put let's put ourselves in the shoes of the people who executed these witches. They genuinely were afraid. They might have been genuinely afraid that they were actually witches that they were dealing with and something needed to be dealt. And going back to the balancing perspective, it's like, well, we balance that perspective of like, well, those people are really afraid of witches. So like, let's think about this from their perspective instead of just demonizing them for executing people for being witches. And it's like, no, you don't really balance that out because I don't know, this might be news to some of the viewers out there, but witches are not real. So
yeah, and he has, I think, sort of going to the more philosophical aspects, he has a very deterministic mind. And I think a lot of, I'd say a lot of people interested in history have this also, like, basically everything that is, the way the German people have acted is just a result of all the forces like acting against them, because of the depression, because of the, the loss of the First World War, they just had to move in that direction. Basically, they had no volition. They just they just went there. And he'll talk about Adolf Hitler a bit, and when he talks about him, it's also like that. Basically, he had to invade certain countries. He had to invade Soviet Union. He had to act in a certain way against the Allies. But I'd urge you to listen the way he talks about the good guys, basically, the way he talks about Churchill. That's when his determinism goes completely away, and it goes in a very interesting direction. Jonathan, anything you'd like to say before?
Yeah, just quickly, this point about the Germans being, they were so sad because of the Versailles Treaty. The same thing was with the Austrians. The Austrians also, there was a very bad reparations they had to pay. Their economy also struck a significant blow. And yet they didn't,
Bulgaria,
Hungary, all these countries, they didn't elect Hitler, right? They didn't become Nazis. So how does he explain that? Well, why is specifically the Germans are like that, and he doesn't treat the other cases, which clearly don't show that narrative that he's trying to portray.
Well, just to maybe correct you, Austrians did very much elect also very fascistic type of government.
Their Kurt von Schuschnigg, I think was his name. He spent the war in the concentration camp. The Austrian chancellor.
Yeah, because they were like fascists, but they were like anti-Hitler.
Yes, they were not Nazis. They were not. They stood up to Hitler. Actually, they didn't want the Anschluss. So it's not the same. They were bad, but there's a distinction, I think.
Yeah, but I think the main point you are making, you had many nations that basically lost the First World War. Not all of them automatically like became what Germany became. There are people have volition, people can choose a different path, and what has happened is the German people have chosen this path. You have to always remember, Hitler, at least at the start, and pretty much for a long time did enjoy a popular support, especially after Anschluss and after Czechoslovakia. That was like a huge win for him, and even into the Second World War, he was very successful when it came to conquering Europe.
And also just a second, the fact that they felt bad doesn't justify the Holocaust, doesn't justify World War II. So what if they felt bad? Does it mean that they could do whatever they want?
Yeah, especially because you have to look at it. Yeah, they've lost a war that they have declared. Yeah, something's bad gonna happen when you lose a war that you've started. Kirk, anything?
So what if the people of Massachusetts believed in witches? So what? Like there weren't any witches, so it doesn't justify their executions. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's listen to a bit more from it.
But how would you assess Winston Churchill?
I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England Dutchman whose his family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, at every step of the way, like people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Well, right? Why don't you just make the case for that? Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You just said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
That they're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East,
Okay, so it will continue to a much different point later on. So let's comment quickly on this. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, again, you can see his sort of like rejection of free will. He has a podcast with Jocko Willink, and Jocko Willink, because he grew up in New England, he has a certain view of Churchill that he like cannot change, and there's like nothing he can do about it. But I mean, even his other points. I mean, again, calling Churchill chief villain, and what's the standard? Well, it's not because he killed the most people. It's not because he committed atrocities. It's because he sort of like created the Second World War. I mean, I don't want to be crude, but the way he talks about it, if he, and I'm sorry to say it like that, but if he saw like a woman get raped, he would blame her. He would say, why did you fight back? Why did you fight back? It could have been just it could have been just like a sexual interaction sort of bad, but you made it like much worse. I mean, again, like he said it so nonchalantly, like it could have been just an invasion of Poland, you know. I mean, what do you mean it could have been just an invasion of Poland? And again, he is calling out the fact that Churchill decided to stand up against tyranny, and he said that's bad because you should just whenever there is a dictator, you should just give up. You should just let them do whatever they want, so you won't suffer. This is almost like a yeah, it's just I'm wondering what you guys think. Let me start with Jonathan now. Do you still feel glad about not watching it beforehand?
Yes, I'm glad not to have seen that before. It's more outrageous live. Yeah, it's despicable, it's disgusting. As a person, opposed for the guy he mentioned, he's from New England. I don't know what they have with Churchill, what they like Churchill in New England. I'm from Israel. Churchill actually executed family members of mine who were in the resistance, the Jewish resistance, the Lehi. So I'm not the biggest fan. He was very bad for the Jews in a lot of ways. His government prevented Jewish refugees coming from Germany to Israel. They prevented them from escaping from the Holocaust. They sent some of the ships back to Germany. They landed them in Africa. They expelled some of them to Africa, to Cyprus. A lot of bad things Churchill has done for the Jews and for the Israelis. There's no question. There's no question about that. Nevertheless, he stood up for evil. He stood up for Western civilization. He was the front lines of Western civilization. And despite everybody telling him that it's impossible, he held up a principle that no, you cannot give up to a bully. You cannot give up to Hitler. And that is why he was successful. And he's blaming him for having these principles. From his perspective, which I guess is kind of a pragmatistic philosophy. Why fight? You can have a peace with Hitler. He'll kill some Poles and some Jews. What does it have to do with us English people? And indeed, it was a voice. Chamberlain wanted peace. Lord Halifax wanted. It could have happened if Dunkirk was a worse. Was a disaster. It could have actually happened. So Hitler was a hero in that perspective, and he was a very troubled man, of course. He was depressed. He was an alcoholic. A lot of bad things that we shouldn't learn from him, but we should definitely learn principles. Stand up for evil.
Kirk?
Yeah, one thing I found interesting about this, I didn't watch all of it, so maybe I'm missing something, and then if I am, I apologize ahead of time. But I think one of the appealing traits about Tucker was that he was pretty good when he was on Fox News years ago. He would often have crazy left-wing activists and left-wing professors on his show, and he did a good job at challenging them and asking questions and putting their feet to the fire. Yet with this interview, it just seems like he just kind of nods along and doesn't really push back, doesn't really challenge his guest that much. What's his name? Daryl. I already forget his name. I apologize. Not that
Cooper.
it matters. What?
Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper, thank you. Doesn't really do a good job of challenging him. I thought that was always one of Tucker's better traits, and again, what made him more appealing. And yeah, that's one of my takeaways is why isn't Tucker, even like John Stossel, like when John Stossel will have guests on that he agrees with, I always felt like he does a pretty good job of challenging them and playing devil's advocate and trying to say like, oh, this is what someone might say or ask you about this position, whatever they're talking about. Usually when he has like a free market libertarian leading guests, he's pretty good at challenging them, even if he agrees with them. And I think it's disappointing that Tucker doesn't really
Because
offer
Stossel is a
this
real
level of
journalist.
scrutiny. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can just go look at the interview he did with Putin. I mean, he just lets people ramble. You know, they just come on his thing, and I mean that's why you know you have to remember the only reason why he would be able to even get an interview with Putin is because they knew that yeah there would be no pushback coming from him. And similar here, I mean, he tried to sort of like well, why is like Churchill bad? Or sort of like why do you consider him that? But even that was super weak, and again he didn't even push him. Again, it's sort of like I think there are questions like what's the alternative? Would it be like, is he actually saying that it would be better if like England like sued for peace and basically Hitler would be able and again, don't forget, like Hitler wouldn't stop. He would take over Yugoslavia, Greece, pretty much all of Europe would be under either directly under Hitler or basically by regimes very friendly to him. And he is saying that this would be a better alternative than what we had because because some Germans died because of the war, or you had like more people dying. Again, it's such a like purely, I don't know what to even call it, materialistic, but sort of like completely devoid of any principles, devoid of any like actual beliefs in good or evil or in any sort of in any sort of like actual beliefs. But let's continue because I think the next clip is gonna be probably the worst one. So good luck.
In 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners, and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now? And so this is like 2 months into the invasion, right? And like my view on this, I argue with my Zionist interlocutors about this all the time with regard to the current war in Gaza. Look, man, like maybe you, as the Germans, you felt like you had to invade to the east. Maybe you thought that Stalin was such a threat, or that if he launched a surprise attack and seized the oil fields in Romania, that you would now not have the fuel to actually respond and you'd be crippled and all of Europe would be under threat and whatever it was that like maybe you thought you had to do that. But at the end of the day, you launched that war with no plan to care for the millions and millions of civilians and prisoners of war that were going to come under your control. And millions of people died because of that, right? And you can look at it and say like,
remember, Churchill's the real bad guy here.
Holocaust was more humane is pretty much what he had implied.
Yes, but didn't he also insinuate that Israel is doing a Holocaust? Israel is literally not only the Holocaust is more humane, but Israel is actually, they're actual Nazis. The Zionists are Nazis, but it's more humane to do that. I was kind of confused by that, but Yeah, they were actually doing us a service. We should actually thank Hitler. We should actually why was my school, for example, sent to Poland to the concentration camps and death camps? Why were we thinking all these bad things about the Nazis, where in fact they were actually being nice to us and preventing us from dying from starvation. We should thank them, really. Um, it's completely preposterous. I don't know how this guy this interviewer just yes, interesting. Yeah, the Einsatzgruppen, they killed them immediately in the tens of thousands. They're just shooting them. Was that also a humane way of execution? The gas chambers are very humane. Um, I don't even know how to react to this. Actually, it's a bit much. Maybe Kirk, you go on.
Yeah, at the very least, it's incoherent, and I'm really trying to fight the urge to correct him on the facts. But I already noticed on Twitter, the community notes are running wild, and everyone's offering corrections, which is good. That's healthy. I love that. But again, notice the charitability. He calls Churchill the villain of this whole war, when from my understanding, the war, England or the UK already declared war on Germany before Churchill even took power. And I believe the Germans already attacked Britain, right? Or did they do that after Churchill took power?
Well, Germany attacked Poland, and basically France
Yeah.
and UK came in as to defend the nation. And I think there were guarantees for defending Poland.
But yeah, Churchill's somehow the bad guy, but he acknowledges that Hitler starts the war, and he starts a war, and oopsie daisy, we didn't really have a plan to feed all the prisoners of war, so the humane thing to do is to kill them, millions of people, innocent people. But somehow Churchill's the bad guy for wanting to for one, noticing that what Hitler and the Nazis are doing in Europe, starting this war and systematically killing people because, again, oopsie daisy, forgot to set food aside to feed all these prisoners. And then Churchill wants to stand up to this monster, and somehow he's the real villain of World War II.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation is just crazy. Again, the fact that he uses that as a sort of it's somehow more excusable, it somehow makes it less evil. The fact, I mean, even if we took his word for it that Germans weren't prepared, which again is not even true, but let's say we took it okay, they just didn't expect that they would get so many people. The fact that this would be somehow
they had a problem.
Yeah. Yeah,
they had a problem, and the Germans felt like coming up with a solution. And the problem to the solution, which was called the final solution, they felt like doing the gas chambers and all of that. And, they didn't have food. So they might as well have gassed them. And, Israel, by the way, is doing the same thing. And Churchill is the bad guy.
Yeah, and the whole sort of that somehow the German people have felt threatened by the Soviet Union, and this sort of justification. I think Jonathan plays paradox games. I think you play City Skylines or something like that. But do you play grand strategies like Hearts of Iron?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I think his knowledge is Hearts of Iron knowledge. They have these oil fields in Romania, and they have to protect them, so they had to attack preemptively.
Yeah, and if he's a Hoy player, he surely understands that being the German side is much more enjoyable, right? So of course, you get to attack everybody, you get to invade England. It's more exciting. So of course, he takes their side.
Yeah, and it's so. Sorry, I think I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, just this whole sort of they had to act in a certain way because again the force is on the outside, and sort of completely these basically every single German politician, every single German general is excused because they felt in a certain way. This sort of feelings escape you of any responsibility for your actions. And I'm not even necessarily I don't even necessarily have to then again, it's sort of like historical knowledge more than anything else. But again, that doesn't like excuse it anyway. Germans felt threatened by the Jews and by the by the Bolshevik cultural whatever, like cultural Bolshevism. That doesn't like in any way excuse, like you should be judged by what's true, not by what's what you feel. What do you do in when it comes to your feelings?
Yes, I very agree with you, Dan. I just there's this point he said about what was he say? This my Zionist friends. Did he say that friends?
Yeah.
How could a Zionist be his friend? And how could like if he's like attacking Britain for being against Germany, why does he attack Israel for supposedly doing what Germany is doing to the Jews, to the Palestinians? Why is Israel bad here and not good like the Germans are in his scenario? I didn't quite get that.
I mean, even so
maybe
earlier on, he like talked about the history of Zionism, but again, it was so like broad. He like something that's very telling is I could go. I think I went through almost the whole interview, and there was not a single thing I had to like Google. Like he didn't bring up like new event I haven't heard before. He didn't bring up like new organization I haven't heard before, a new concept, like anything like that. It was all like. And I'm a 22-year-old who has been just like, who has pretty much surface level knowledge on most things. And I was able to follow the conversation. And again, that's a big red flag when it comes to this. When like this supposed expert is coming here and there's like nothing he brought up that I haven't like heard before. But we still have a few things I'd like to go through. So let's continue and just make sure I have it. Let's go.
Turn off peace proposals to Britain and France because they had already declared war. He didn't expect them to declare war, actually. Like there's a famous scene where he kind of throws a fit when he finds out that they did do that. And so he doesn't want to fight France. He doesn't want to fight Britain. He feels that's going to weaken Europe when we've got this huge threat to the east, the communist threat over there. And he starts firing off peace proposals. He says, let's not do this. Like, we can't do this. And of course, a year goes by, 1940 comes around, and they're still at war. And so he launches his invasion to the west, takes over France, takes over Western and Northern Europe. Once that's done, and the British have, escaped at Dunkirk. There's no British force left on the continent. There's no opposing force left on the continent. In other words, the war is over, and the Germans won. Okay,
but by what point?
Fall of 1940, right? So there's literally no opposing force on the continent, and throughout that summer, Adolf Hitler is firing off radio broadcasts, giving speeches, literally sending planes over to drop leaflets over London and other British cities, trying to get the message to these people that Germany does not want to fight you. Like, we don't want to fight you. Offering peace proposals that, it said, you keep all your overseas colonies. We don't want any of that. We want Britain to be strong. The world needs Britain to be strong.
We took over half of Poland. We took over Austria and Czechoslovakia. We are still occupying more than half of France, but we don't want war. Guys, come on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm a bit sure. That's what the planes dropped over London, leaflets. That's what they dropped. That's what they dropped over Coventry. It was just paper.
What's Churchill all worked up about? I mean, he only took Nazi Germany only took over France and all of Europe. Why is Churchill all worked up? Oh, by the way, when looking at this, you need to put your feet in the shoes of the Germans in Weimar Germany and know what they're feeling. But ignore Churchill and everyone in the UK and what they were feeling after watching Nazi Germany just run all over Europe.
They literally did. They literally leveled British cities. He didn't care to mention that. That's like,
yeah. I mean,
leaflets.
He actually mentioned a specific date, which was great because I could like pinpoint. Like, Battle of Britain was still ongoing. Like, Hitler was trying to gain air superiority so he could invade UK. Again, it's such a revisionist history. It's hard to even imagine.
And like I like that how Tucker was like asking. He didn't know this was like new for him. He's so ignorant. This guy doesn't know basic World War II history. It's amazing.
Yeah, but let's move on because he'll talk about Churchill a bit more. So let's listen a bit more.
Ended up happening, but that's what everybody thought was going to happen. And so Churchill, I mean, you have a guy who Churchill wanted a war. He wanted to fight Germany. And the reason that I don't begrudge him that, people can national leaders, you can fight whoever you want. If you feel like your the long-term interests of the British Empire are threatened by the rise of a powerful continental power like Germany, and you need to check that those are great power games, and you play them the way you feel like you need to play them. That's fine. The reason I resent Churchill so much for it is that he kept this war going when he had no way to go back and fight this war. All he had were bombers. He was literally, by 1940, sending bomber fleets to go firebomb the Black Forest, just to burn down sections of the Black Forest. Just rank terrorism, going through and starting to, what eventually became just the carpet bombing, the saturation bombing of civilian neighborhoods, to kill, is the purpose of which was to kill as many civilians as possible. And all the men were out in the field. All the fighting age men were out in the field. And so this is old people, it's women and children, and they knew that. And they were wiping these places out. It was as gigantic scaled terrorist attacks, the greatest.
Well, first I would ask, why are all men in the field if Hitler wanted peace? But, that's just a minor thing. Again, it's the UK that did the terrorism. It's Churchill who wanted war. It's, Hitler is this like peacemaker, while Churchill is this like warmongering, hawk who just wants war for whatever reason. Jonathan, what do you think?
Maybe it's a bit ad hoc. I'm sorry about that, but I was just there's a really good show, The Man in the High Castle, which is an alternative history about what happens if Germany wins World War II. And there are a few characters, like in America, who like switch sides and they serve the Nazis. And I just cannot imagine this guy with his blonde hair not putting on the swastika armband on the first day that the Nazis come.
Kirk?
Yeah, I don't know what to say about this other than what about what the Nazis were doing to their own people? I mean, and then he's going to get worked up about Churchill burning the Black Forest down, but like, weren't the Nazis like systematically already? I don't know if they were doing it by this point. Again, I'm a little fuzzy on the date, so I apologize to anyone who's going to light me up in the comments or the chat or whatever. But yeah, the Nazis were systematically killing people in Germany and in their neighbors, and he's mad at Churchill for retaliating against. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Kristallnacht, happened much longer before even the Second World War started. And again,
the Nuremberg laws, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hitler was in power for...
Oh, that's what they felt like, so it's fine, The Germans felt like legislating the Nuremberg laws and, executing the Jews and all that. They just felt like it, so it's fine,
The Reichstag fire decree.
Yeah.
But the Brits aren't allowed to have feelings, I suppose. If the British felt like leveling Dresden, why aren't they allowed to have their feelings? Why is this anti-British sentiment? I don't. It kind of sounds rather Aryan to me.
And to Daniel's point earlier, he mentioned that, like, yeah, the Germans, there was a genuine concern about the rise of Bolshevism and communism in Germany. And I remember reading The Vampire Economy, and it talks about how, a lot of Germans, especially like large farmers and landowners, supported the Nazis because they're like, oh, these guys are going to save Germany from Bolshevism and communism. And a lot of these people soon found out that the Nazis were going to come after them eventually. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we have these. Okay, I want to say we have these sort of people today. I don't necessarily mean on the scale of supporting the Nazis, but you have people who are like, the left is so bad that we have to support the right on whatever it is. And you might even have people on the opposing side. But again, if that is taken further and further and further, it will eventually lead to basically Hitler-like scenario, because and I have I think someone in the chat said I am authoritarian until we get rid of the Islamists or something like that. And again, that sort of view fuels authoritarianism. This, we hate the other group so much that we'll even go as far as supporting authoritarianism just because it will suppress them. And yeah, you have this. People were afraid of communists, so we will support this Hitler guy because it seems like the lesser of two evils. But again, it will lead to this sort of people. But thankfully, you don't have to be afraid, because you'll always have people like him who will defend whatever you say. You just felt like it, and he'll defend you. But I think we have one more clip on Churchill, and then there are a few clips from later on that I think are also very revealing that I want to play. But let's hear a bit more of Churchill.
Raven, ugly way to fight a war. And
what was the motive?
Well, Churchill's got a long and complicated history. I mean, he's somebody who
that was the wryest smile I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, look, I think on one level, there was a sense that Churchill was sort of humiliated by his performance in the First World War as the head of the Admiralty, and he was out in the cold for a long time.
I mean, Gallipoli.
Yeah, and which was his operation.
Yeah,
and so he was rightly held responsible for that and seen as responsible for one of the great disasters that the British suffered during that war. And so I think part of it was probably kind of personal. He wanted redemption. He wanted to go out there and like prove that he's the warlord that can go out there and fight this big war. Probably. I think part of it, I read about Churchill, and he strikes me as a psychopath. But he's also a sort of, he was a drunk. He was very childish in strange ways. People would talk about how as an adult, like as prime minister, they'd find him in his room and he's like playing with action figures like war toys and army men and stuff, and would get mad when people would interrupt him, when he was doing that. So this is a strange.
So, Hitler had to do something while Churchill wanted to do something. And that's why I started the show. I think this guy is an actual like Hitler apologist, because of the way this sort of like contextually, he'll never say that about Hitler, and he'll even say, at some point he'll say something like, well, yeah, in the end, like Hitler was responsible for it and something like that. But the way he talks about Churchill, like comparatively, I think shows something truly disgusting. But Jonathan, what's your take?
If he were to say, okay, Churchill, it was a complex character, which he was, and he could say, I don't know all the facts. He could say, maybe the mental problems, but you can't say, if you say that, you have to say the same sentence. Hitler was a complete psychopath. Everybody knows about that, right? He doesn't mention that. He doesn't mention they're not on the same level. Like Churchill is way worse than Hitler. Well, I haven't seen the whole thing. So did he spoke about Hitler in his psychological problems? Did he have things to say about that? No, it was only about Churchill's and how he was evil and crazy and a warmonger. And he didn't have anything bad to say about Hitler. Or maybe you guys know?
I think, again, from what I remember, he said something like, ultimately, like Hitler was responsible for, invading Soviet Union or things like that. But it's so mild comparatively.
It's a very bizarre type of rhetoric to make, and I would challenge him to reveal some deeper motivations that he has to do these things, because it seems very bizarre to me. Why would you go into these lengths If you're a proper historian, why would you go to these lengths to defame Churchill, and you wouldn't have anything to say about the man he was standing up against? I found it to be very bizarre. At
Sure.
best, bizarre.
You know, say what you will about Hitler. He did a lot of bad stuff. He started a world war and did a lot of horrible things. But have you guys considered that Churchill would throw a temper tantrum whenever he got interrupted playing with his little toys? You guys ever consider that? Huh? Huh? Or, you know, that's why, you know, the British got behind Churchill in the war effort during World War II. It wasn't to stop a threat like Nazi Germany, as they were taking over France and Poland and cutting deals with Stalin and all that fun stuff. No, it was really a big Make-A-Wish effort for Churchill, because he was embarrassed in World War One. In the UK, all the working class, all the people in the UK, they just band together like, this is for you, Winston. We're doing it's like when a retiring athlete, a superstar athlete, is in like the last year of his career, and it's like, okay, this is our last chance to win a Super Bowl or a Stanley Cup before this guy retires. Like when Ray Bork went to the Colorado Avalanche, like, oh, we're doing this for you, Ray Bork. You know, we got to get you one last one because you haven't had your glory yet. That's why the UK got involved with World War II. It was a Make-A-Wish for Winston Churchill.
Yeah, again, it's such a, you know, you can look, you can, like, you know, if you want to study America and what it did domestically during the Second World War II.
Your mic cut out there for a second. I'm like, is that on my end?
I think it's on Dan's end.
Okay, I think
Uh-oh.
I fixed it. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, the establishment, like I said, the establishment is trying to silence us. Yeah. You ever
hear me now?
think about that? Yeah,
Yes,
I
yes,
can hear you.
Yeah, so you can, like, you know, America did some, and it was just about when I was going to say this. America did, you know, had internment camps for people of Japanese origin. You know, there was some horrible stuff that has happened. But the way, again, people bring it up, again, you know, you want to talk about Hitler? Let's not talk about Hitler. Did you know that, like, America had, like, internment camps during the World War? They are much worse than Germany ever was. Again, this is the way they always bring it up. Is basically, if the good country did one bad thing, then, you know, we might as well let Hitler take over Europe.
If I may say a deeper point, I think the way he talks about feelings is very National Socialist like. The Germans, they made a big deal out of the will of the German folk. They were also voluntaries. They were also about the executing the will of the German people. And who knows the will? Who can tell the will of the German people? You need the Führer, and the Führer, he's in touch with the Deutsche Volk, and he knows what needs to be done. So his submission to the primacy of will is very much like what the Nazis what their philosophy was like.
Okay, let's listen to one last clip where he talks about a bit more contemporary stuff. So you might hear an interesting thing.
Leader I've ever met.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I get a similar sense from Mr. Putin in Russia, where, you know, he's a hard man. You don't drag Russia out of its state in the 1990s without being a hard man. But it's probably hoping for a little too much that whoever follows him up, you know, if we were to do something that would end his rule, that whatever would come next would be beneficial to us.
Okay, so Trump, Orban, and Putin,
Yeah.
I can say, this is my perception of all three of them, is that none of them is particularly ideological. All three are pretty sincere nationalists, not like crazed ideological nationalists, but just sort of want to do the best for their country. None of them is like a religious nut, and none of them is like especially right wing. They're all in the 1984, 5, 6 context, they would be sort of moderate, maybe conservative Democrats, liberal Republicans. Like they're not at all what people claim they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the post World War II order is really defined by the fact that, you know, after Nuremberg, it really became effectively illegal in the West to be like genuinely right wing. Like the things we call right wing, I mean, it's all flavors of liberalism, basically, right? And like,
when you say Orban, Putin, Trump, the first thing that comes to mind is, those are like liberals. Those are like, sort of like a bit older liberals, like Bill Clinton, those kind of like liberals is who Putin is. Again, and I think it was very revealing what he said later, basically that there are no right wingers, there are no conservatives now. It's all just the flavors of liberalism. And I would ask him, wait, what does liberalism mean to you? Like separation of powers? Putin has been ruling Russia for a good few decades now. Rule of law, having certain democratic institutions. Because if that's what you mean by liberalism, then everyone should be liberal, should want to be liberal. I think it's very revealing the sort of almost like a disgust he has to liberalism, and the fact that he doesn't even consider, again, people like Orban, Trump, and Putin as conservative.
And also what he said, it's basically illegal to be right wing.
Yeah.
What is illegal? To be a Nazi. So he's saying to be a right wing is to be a Nazi, and it's a bad thing that it's illegal to be a Nazi. I'm just trying to follow the logic here.
Yeah,
and he's complaining about this. So maybe he wants to be a Nazi, and the laws are oppressing him, and that's why he's talking to Tucker about this.
Yeah, again, because throughout Europe, you have like neo-Nazist parties. Some of them, almost none of them are explicitly neo-Nazis because, many of these laws have rules against them. And in my country, few parties have been disbanded because of it. But the same people just founded a new party and are currently in government. Currently in parliament. So again, what he says is like, again, very revealing. The fact that he says you cannot even be right wing. He does actually mean like being as far as like explicitly Nazi. That's why I think he is like an actual apologist. I think hopefully he knows it, and I hope he's not just some sort of like really sort of like idiot supporter. But the way he speaks about it, I think he pretty much, the only thing that doesn't make him a Nazi is the fact that he didn't openly say it. But you can sort of read between the lines of what he says. Kirk or Jonathan?
I think the fact that you have somebody like Tucker who seems to be surprised and to agree with these things, and he goes and records this and he puts it on YouTube and he gets millions of views, is very it reminds me of Black Mirror. It's kind of dystopian. It's like if we were 10 years ago and we would just I would tell you, Kirk, in 10 years there'll be a guy who interviews Nazis and he gets millions of views, and the richest person in the world shares that. Like it'll seem silly, but we've reached this point where it's actually dystopian. These things that he's saying, that it's ridiculous.
Kirk, anything you'd like to say?
One of the positives from an episode like this, and I think this has been a growing trend, is that a lot of people on the right, a lot of conservatives, even some of the more nationalist and populist types who probably 3 to 5 years ago were big fans of Tucker Carlson, a lot of these people are rightfully abandoning Tucker. They're leaping off the Tucker Carlson bandwagon and talking about how horrible this is. And that's great. That's good. I'm not here to say I told you so or whatever, because I didn't think Tucker would get this bad. But at the same time, it's like a lot of these same people were willing to tolerate Tucker's contrarian bullshit on Ukraine. And when you watch this interview, like Daryl Cooper's analysis of World War II is really not much different than how Tucker and Candace Owens types have been talking about Russia and Ukraine. Like, oh, let's think about this from Putin's perspective. Go read his speeches. And, he probably felt a little threatened by NATO and felt like Ukraine was taken away from Russia unjustly and sees it as a part of Russia. And what about all these New York Times pieces about how Ukraine is a corrupt government? Hey, I'm just asking questions. This is not really that much different. And I think it says a lot that it took so long for a lot of conservatives to finally call this out when they were much more tolerant and accepting and willing to run with Tucker when he was really bad before. But it took something like this, and same thing with Candace Owens. When Candace Owens got a little more comfortable with anti-Semitism, that's what it took. Like, I remember watching a conservative say, like, yeah, I didn't like it when Candace Owens was like all about all these conspiracy theories about the moon landing being fake and this and that. But then but then the Jew stuff started happening, and that's when I jumped up. It's like, I don't know, maybe you guys should have been calling this out earlier, or I don't know. I hope a lot of conservatives and people on the right are doing some soul searching after seeing the downfall of these lunatics that they were fans of just a few years ago.
And speaking of conspiracy theories, this is all a conspiracy. This guy is a conspiracy theorist. Nazism, or broadly religion, is a huge conspiracy. That there's this will of the German people, and we just need to get some Lebensraum, and we need the Führer, and he will take care of us, and that's actually the way things should be, and it's nothing like what it is now. Everything now is fake. It's all capitalist, bourgeois. It's all in control of the Jews. These are all conspiracies. And these guys, Tucker basically became Alex Jones.
All right, I think we've heard from these people more than enough. Jonathan, where can people find you?
Yes, I agree with you there. Yes, the viewers can find me on philosophyIneedit.com, my blog on Substack, link in the description.
Kirk?
You can find me on Elon Musk's website. My name, Kirk Wilcox, and I'm also on YouTube, Kirk Wilcox. So check me out when you get a chance.
And I'm Damned Dan on YouTube. You can also find that in the description. And just quickly, I have just one last short clip to part our ways.
Oh, epilogue.
Fuck Tucker. Tucker sucks.
All right.
Excellent.
Nice.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and The Reality Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you.